Was I wrong for what I did? Honestly, I still don't know. I've replayed that day 1,000 times in my head, and every single time I feel the same gut-wrenching mix of fury and disbelief. My own sister, looking me straight in the eye, told me, "We don't feed extras," as her 2 kids devoured lobster tails, and my son, my sweet hungry 5-year-old, sat there with nothing but a glass of water. If you had been there, tell me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed calm? Would you have just taken it? Because I couldn't. I absolutely could not. Let me take you back to where this all began, because to understand that moment, you need to understand the history, the dynamic, the years of subtle digs and overt slights that led to my breaking point. My sister Sarah and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was the golden child, the prettier, smarter, more charming one in our parents' eyes. I was always just me, the quieter, more artistic one who never quite lived up to Sarah's shadow. This dynamic only intensified as we got older. Sarah married well, as they say. Her husband, Mark, is a successful lawyer, and they live in this sprawling, immaculate house in the affluent part of town. They have 2 beautiful, well-behaved children, Olivia and James, who are 7 and 9 now. Everything about their lives, from their designer clothes to their exotic vacations, screams success. My life, on the other hand, took a different path. I'm a single mom to my incredible son Leo. His father left when I was pregnant, and I've been raising Leo on my own ever since. It's been tough, really tough. I work 2 jobs, a barista in the mornings and a freelance graphic designer at night, just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. We live in a small apartment, and while it's not much, it's ours, and it's filled with love. Leo is my world. He's the most sweet, kind, and resilient little boy you could ever imagine. He understands that money is tight, and he never complains, even when all he wants is that shiny new toy or another scoop of ice cream. My parents, bless their hearts, try to help, but they always seem to prioritize Sarah. Their reasoning, they've explained to me countless times, is that Sarah has more responsibilities and a higher social standing to maintain. It always felt like a slap in the face, a reinforcement of the idea that I was somehow less deserving. Holidays were always a particular brand of torture. We'd all gather at Sarah's house, which was always perfectly decorated, smelling of potpourri and expensive candles. Her kids would be showered with gifts, while Leo would get 1 or 2 token presents, usually hand-me-downs from Olivia or James that Sarah had deemed small or out of fashion. I tried not to let it bother me, for Leo's sake, but it stung every single time. I always made sure Leo had something nice, something new, even if it meant I had to skip a meal or 2 to afford it. But this particular day, this wasn't a holiday. This was a regular Sunday lunch, a family gathering as Sarah called it, but it felt more like a command performance. She had called me on Friday, her voice dripping with the usual passive-aggressive sweetness, inviting us to lunch. "It'll be lovely," she'd said. "Just a casual get-together. The kids can play in the pool." Leo, overhearing, had been ecstatic. He loves swimming, and our apartment complex doesn't have a pool. He spent the entire weekend buzzing with excitement, talking about all the games he'd play with his cousins. I, on the other hand, felt a familiar dread settling in. I knew what these casual get-togethers entailed. They were always an opportunity for Sarah to subtly flaunt her wealth, and for me to feel like the poor relation. But for Leo, I'd do anything. So, Sunday morning, I dressed Leo in his best, albeit slightly faded, swim trunks and a t-shirt, and we made our way to Sarah's mansion. The drive always felt long, winding through perfectly manicured streets, past houses that looked like they belonged in a magazine. When we arrived, the front door was already open, and the scent of something delicious wafted out. Sarah greeted us with a tight smile, her perfectly coiffed hair not a strand out of place. Her kids, Olivia and James, were already splashing in the huge, sparkling pool. Leo's eyes lit up, and he practically launched himself towards the backyard. "Go on, sweetie," I told him. "Have fun." I watched him for a moment, his joy infectious, and for a brief second I thought, maybe this time will be different. Maybe she'll just be a sister, and we can all just enjoy a nice day. How naive I was. I went inside to find Sarah's husband, Mark, engrossed in a golf game on the giant plasma TV in the living room. He barely grunted a hello. My parents were there too, sitting at the immaculately set dining table, already sipping mimosas. "Oh, there you are, dear," my mom said, her voice a little too bright. "We were just about to eat." My stomach rumbled. I hadn't had time for breakfast, rushing to get Leo ready and make sure we weren't late. I assumed, foolishly, that there would be enough for everyone. I sat down at the table, next to my mom, and took in the spread. It was, as usual, extravagant. A platter of perfectly grilled lobster tails, a bowl of glistening pasta primavera, a fresh garden salad with some kind of fancy vinaigrette, and a basket of artisan bread. Everything looked incredible. "Sarah, this all looks amazing," I said, genuinely impressed despite myself. "Thank you," she said, preening slightly. "Mark caught the lobsters himself on his last fishing trip. It's a special treat," my dad chuckled, "only the best for our Sarah." I tried to ignore the familiar sting. Leo, by this point, had emerged from the pool, dripping wet and shivering slightly. "Mommy, I'm hungry," he said, his voice small. "Can I eat now?" My heart squeezed. He always gets so hungry after swimming. "Of course, sweetie," I said, reaching for a plate. But before I could, Sarah intercepted. "Oh, Leo," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We're just about to serve the main course. Go get dried off and change into some clean clothes first. Okay, you don't want to get water all over the dining room." It was a reasonable request, I thought, and Leo, ever compliant, nodded and went to the bathroom to change. While he was gone, Sarah began serving the food. She piled Olivia's and James's plates high with lobster and pasta, then served generous portions for herself, Mark, and my parents. I noticed she didn't serve me, but I figured she'd get to me last. I was wrong. She finished serving everyone, then sat down, picking up her own fork. "Aren't you going to eat, honey?" my mom asked me. "Oh, I was just waiting for Leo," I said, glancing towards the bathroom door. "He should be out any second." Just then, Leo emerged, dressed in dry clothes. He looked so hopeful, his eyes wide as he took in the delicious food. "Can I have some, Aunt Sarah?" he asked politely. Sarah looked at him, then at me, and then her gaze swept over the table, lingering on the almost empty platter of lobster. "Oh, Leo, sweetie," she began, her voice sugary but with an edge I knew all too well. "I'm so sorry, but it looks like we don't have enough lobster left. We weren't expecting extras." Extras. The word hit me like a physical blow. Extras. My son, her nephew, her blood, was an extra. I felt the blood drain from my face. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but said nothing. Mark just continued to eat, oblivious or uncaring. "What do you mean, extras, Sarah?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "He's your nephew. He's family." "Well, yes, of course," she said, taking a delicate bite of her lobster. "But we only planned for 6. Mark caught just enough for the adults and my children. It's a very specific kind of lobster, you see, quite expensive." She then turned to Leo, who was now looking confused and crestfallen. "But don't worry, sweetie. I have some lovely tap water for you. It's very refreshing after swimming." And with that, she got up, went to the kitchen, and returned with a glass of water, which she placed directly in front of Leo. He looked from the water to his cousins, who were still happily devouring their lobster, then back to me, his lower lip trembling. That's when it happened. That's when something inside me snapped. All the years of feeling second, best, all the subtle slights, all the times I'd swallowed my pride for the sake of family. It all converged into a single, burning point of rage. My son, my innocent, sweet boy, was being humiliated and deprived of food in front of his own family, while they feasted like kings. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have just taken Leo and left quietly? Would you have confronted her then and there? Would you have done something entirely different? I'm genuinely curious to know, because in that moment, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I looked at Sarah, then at my parents, who were studiously avoiding my gaze, then back at Leo, whose eyes were now brimming with tears. That was it. The line had been crossed. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. The scraping of my chair against the polished floor seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but laced with an intensity that made her finally look at me. "Are you seriously telling me that you invited my son to your house for lunch, and you intentionally did not make enough food for him?" She tried to feign innocence. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, darling. It's just a misunderstanding. We simply miscalculated the portions." "Miscalculated?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You miscalculated enough food for a 5-year-old boy, while your children eat gourmet lobster." My parents still said nothing, just stared at their plates. Mark finally looked up, a flicker of annoyance on his face. "Now, hold on," he said, "it's not a big deal. He can have some bread and water." "It is a big deal, Mark," I retorted, my voice rising. "It's a huge deal. This isn't about bread and water. This is about basic human decency. This is about treating family with respect, which clearly neither of you are capable of." I looked at Leo, his face streaked with tears now, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. "Come on, sweetie," I said, reaching for his hand. "We're leaving." "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Sarah said, sounding genuinely surprised now. "You're going to make a scene over a little lobster." "Yes, Sarah," I said, pulling Leo close. "I am, because my son is not an extra. He is family, and he deserves to be treated as such." As I turned to leave, something clicked in my mind. A memory, a particularly vivid one, of a conversation I'd had with Sarah a few weeks prior. She had been bragging about a new antique vase she'd bought, a delicate, hand-painted piece from the Ming dynasty, or so she claimed, that cost her a fortune. She had placed it on a small pedestal in the entryway, right by the front door, where everyone could see it the moment they walked in. "It's irreplaceable," she'd gushed, "the crown jewel of my collection." A mischievous, vengeful thought sparked in my mind, and without a second thought, I acted on it. As I walked past the pedestal, still holding Leo's hand, I casually, but firmly, swung my free arm out. My elbow connected squarely with the vase. There was a sickening crunch, a loud clatter, and then the sound of porcelain shattering on the marble floor. The vase exploded into 1,000 irreparable pieces, scattering across the entryway. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Sarah's jaw dropped. Her face went from smug indifference to pure, unadulterated horror in an instant. "My vase!" she shrieked, jumping up from the table, almost knocking over her chair. "What did you do?" My parents finally sprang to life, my mom gasping, my dad looking utterly appalled. Mark just stared, wide-eyed. I turned to Sarah, a cold, hard glare in my eyes. That, I said, my voice calm despite the tremor in my hands, is what happens when you treat family like garbage. That's what happens when you humiliate my child. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to have something precious destroyed by someone who claims to care about you. Sarah was practically hyperventilating, staring at the shattered fragments of her irreplaceable vase. You monster, that cost thousands, she wailed. Really? I said, raising an eyebrow, because to me, it looks like a pile of ceramic, not nearly as valuable as my son's dignity. I then pulled Leo firmly towards the door. Come on, Leo, let's go get some real food. We walked out, leaving a stunned and furious Sarah, 2 shocked parents, and a bewildered Mark in our wake. Leo, still a bit teary, looked up at me as we got into the car. Mommy, what happened to Aunt Sarah's pretty pot? He asked innocently. I squeezed his hand. It broke, sweetie. It just wasn't as strong as it looked. I drove us to our favorite diner, and I let Leo order whatever he wanted. A cheeseburger, fries, and a huge chocolate milkshake. As he ate, his face finally relaxing into a happy smile, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Regret, a little, maybe, but mostly a profound sense of satisfaction. I had stood up for my son. I had finally drawn a line. The aftermath, as you can imagine, was explosive. My phone started ringing off the hook the moment we got home. First, Sarah, screaming threats and accusations about suing me for damages. I calmly told her that if she wanted to take me to court, I'd be happy to explain to a judge exactly why her irreplaceable vase met its untimely demise. Then my parents called, lecturing me about my unacceptable behavior and how I had embarrassed the family. I told them that if they cared so much about family, maybe they should have spoken up when their grandson was being denied food. I hung up on both of them. It's been a few weeks since that day. Sarah hasn't spoken to me, which, frankly, is a relief. My parents have sent a few passive-aggressive texts, but I've mostly ignored them. Leo is none the wiser, thankfully. He just remembers the delicious diner food and the fun he had swimming before everything went south. He doesn't know the depth of cruelty his aunt displayed, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as possible. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Was destroying her vase really the right thing to do? Could I have handled it differently? But then I remember Leo's trembling lip, the look of confusion and hurt in his eyes, and the callous indifference of my own sister, and I know, in my heart, that I did what I had to do. I protected my child, and I finally stood up for myself, and for me, that's enough. So that's my story. It's been a lot to process, and I'm still figuring out where we go from here. Like this video, if you were on my side in this whole mess. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this entire situation in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.